Dearly beloved, we're gathered here today to talk about movies. Welcome to the pilot episode of a new podcast. I'm Skye Jethani. You might know me from the Phil Vischer podcast, where I'm a co-host. I'm also sort of an ordained pastor, writer, speaker. I wear many hats. And I'm here today with Josh Lindsay.
Hello, everybody.
You guys don't know Josh. Josh is kind of new to the podcast thing, but we have some history. So, Josh, you and I met originally at Blanchard.
At church, yes.
At church. We were at the same church, and you happened to, at that time, be working for...
Big Idea, Phil Vischer.
Yes, where you also met...
My wife, Angie.
Right. So there's this weird Phil Vischer connection behind us, but Phil's not here today.
Correct.
Okay. So here's the deal. Let me give you a little background on what we're doing, guys. This is a pilot episode. If you are listening to this, it's probably because you are a Patreon subscriber supporting the Phil Vischer podcast, for which we are incredibly grateful. And in fact... the fact that you've given some money to the Patreon campaign is why we're able to do this pilot episode experimenting with a new podcast. So Phil and I were sitting around talking about what people have resonated with on the Phil Vischer podcast. And one of the things we realized is that people tended to engage really well on those shows where we talked about movies. And so we thought, well, what if we did like a movie podcast or a regular thing where we reviewed movies from time to time, and not just reviewed them like this is safe for the family or this isn't, or this is a nice Christian movie or that isn't, but reviewed them based on what they say about our culture or what they say about the moment we're in. And so I thought about Josh, because Josh and I will get together from time to time, and we occasionally would go to movies together. We talk about movies all the time, and you have a movie background.
Yes, I went to film school and pursued... big idea, actually. I saw VeggieTales in the mall one day.
Wait, explain that to people.
So I'm walking in the mall. This is back when I was in high school, I think. Saw VeggieTales for the first time in the way back of a Christian bookstore.
Okay.
And I did the double take because there wasn't 3D animation back then.
Oh, you were seeing it actually on a video monitor.
Correct.
Okay.
So they were playing a video. I did not grow up on it. You know, I was in high school. And so I was a film guy, loved movies, dreamed of getting into the movies and so forth. Saw VeggieTales at a Christian bookstore, did double take. I walked in and I loved it. I couldn't stop watching it, but it was brand new. No one had done anything like this before, but especially in the Christian world.
So this would have been what, circa 1994?
Well, I graduated in 93, so
okay.
yeah.
92?
So, yeah, around there. So, okay, that's great. Fell in love with it, but moved on with my life. I went to school to be a speech therapist because even though I wanted to be in filmmaking, the idea of moving to LA or New York was terrifying to me.
Because you were from Springfield.
Springfield, Illinois, Central Illinois, right. You know, and so the idea of going to the big city was intimidating.
So you thought speech therapy would keep me out of the big city?
Yes. It was safe. It was helpful. I could make a living. Very few men were in that field. It seemed like a great combination of, win-win for me.
You were a very practical-minded person, which is sort of the opposite of a filmmaker.
It was. I did apply to work for Sesame Street. They did respond. They did write back and say, we've got your resume. Mm-hmm. We're going to keep it on file. They've had it for about 25 years now. I have not heard back. I probably need to send an updated resume. But so I pursued speech therapy until my senior year, realizing I hated it, and decided, I had grown in my faith at that point and realized, okay, God could use me somehow in film. So I decided to go to film school.
Okay.
In film school, I went down to Southern Illinois, studied film for a year. I didn't have a horrible experience, but it wasn't the best experience, and so I was really confused what to do. Some friends, about midway through my first year, mentioned VeggieTales was in Chicago, and I should check them out. I went to their website, and it's one of those moments in my life where as soon as I got off the website, I called my sister, and I said, I know what I'm going to do. So I pursued a job with Big Idea, like a lot of people did back then. People heavily pursued them for...
Okay. So they were drawing all the strong Christian talent in the filmmaking business.
Yeah. And me.
Right.
So I tried to be clever about it. I read articles, got some names of people who work there, figured out their email addresses.
So you're basically a stalker.
I was.
Yeah, you were stalking vegetables.
But I wasn't weird about it. There were people who dressed up as vegetables and would, wave from the train platform in Chicago to the people, working in Big Idea.
Oh my goodness.
They could look out the window.
Were they trying to get jobs?
Yeah. Did
it work?
I don't think so.
I hope not.
They had signs that said, I am that employee. which is a line from Larry Boy, I Am That Hero.
Oh. This is like somebody dressing up like Jesus outside a church because they want to go on staff there. It's not exactly the best way to win over.
Or like dressing up like Steve Jobs standing outside of Apple, something crazy like that.
Yeah, but it's still creepy.
It is.
Any way you cut it.
It is. I did make the right contact, became friends with someone, and after 8 months, it finally got to the point where they needed to hire somebody, and I really think they determined, just hire that Josh kid. He seems to want it, and he's not weird, I guess, So
Okay.
got the job, moved up here, dream come true, did meet my wife. I was there for 3 years. Awesome experience. Taught me I don't really want to have an income and a livelihood based on film.
Uh-huh.
I was one of those people who, did lose their jobs, watched Phil go through bankruptcy and just, and watch super, uber talented people have a difficult go at making it, right?
Yeah.
Now, during that time, things were changing. They were going from film to digital, to now people are making films on their phones and things like that. So a lot has changed, and the business of filmmaking has changed. And my desire for film has not changed. And I still make movies, but I do that. I have kids now, so I make them they're my actors, and they're my little
Right,
projects.
slave labor.
That's right. It's free.
So here's the difference between you and me, Josh. You went to film school. You worked for a couple years in the film industry. You are a film aficionado. You actually make films to some level with your own children. That's all great. Here's my thing. I took one film class as an undergraduate.
Okay.
And that's it. That's basically the extent of my film experience, other than I go to the movies like most other people.
Right.
But you and I, over the years, have had some good conversations about movies. So here's what we're going to do. We decided we would experiment with a new podcast and only make it available to our Patreon subscribers at first. So this is an experimental thing, and we really want feedback from those of you on Patreon. Just, what do you like about this? What worked for you? What doesn't work for you? As we refine this, maybe we'll do a couple more episodes kind of just under the Patreon umbrella. And Josh, you'll get your kind of feet wet in the podcast film critic thing. I'll get my feet wet as well. And then if we decide this is worth doing, we might release it to the world. We'll see. We'll put it up there like everything else and make a go of it. If not, hey, it'll be fun. We tried a couple times.
It's fun already.
It's fun already. Okay. So before we dive into the actual content, let me explain to everybody kind of what we're thinking in the structure of this thing. We have called this, at least temporarily, the movie proposal. And we had lunch a couple weeks, or maybe a week ago, and I was talking about this idea. I had just come back from officiating a wedding in Florida, and wedding stuff was like on my mind. And I started thinking about the whole ridiculous wedding tradition of something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue. And I don't even know where it came from. I haven't researched it. I'm sure you can on Wikipedia. But I thought, why don't we use that as a structure for talking about movies each time? So the way we're going to do this is we're going to have 4 segments. 3 of them rather short. First, talking about something old, an old movie that we really enjoy that we want to just bring to our audience's awareness. Then we're going to talk about something new, which is a new movie that we're going to review in greater depth. Something borrowed, we're going to refer to an article or something elsewhere on the internet that we are going to bring in that's related to this conversation. And then something blue, which I will describe at the end, which might surprise people. But we're going to try to keep these segments relatively short, rather quick. This week, we're going to ultimately talk about Zootopia, which is a new movie that came out a few months ago, but it's new on DVD and Blu-ray, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But we're going to begin with something old. So, Josh.
Yes.
Something old, something that's not been out on people's minds for a while, but a movie they really should see or that you want to talk about today for a few minutes. What's on your mind?
Well, what I want to talk about is Finding Nemo. So I think that has been on people's minds because Finding Dory is coming out in a couple days. So a lot of people are,
How old is Finding Nemo?
That's a good question. I want to say it's about 7 to 10 years, something like that.
It's got to be at least, because I remember when my daughter was really young, she's 14 now, that was like running on repeat constantly in our house. 14 years ago, Jason, the engineer, says.
Thank you.
14 years ago. Yeah, she's 14 years old.
Okay.
There you go.
Well, I lose track of time since I'm a father. There's a whole span of gaps of time that go by that feel like a month to me.
I agree. Yeah, but 14, I mean, that's a long time between sequel.
A huge time.
Yeah.
But it was one of their, I think it was their highest grossing, at least for several of their films. They've done, I think, 17, 18 films total.
Pixar, you're talking about.
Pixar has. And at the time, it won Academy Award, at the time, the highest grossing. It was a surprise because I don't think people liked it. In fact, I think there's a great story with, I think it was Katzenberg, one of those guys, back when Jobs was involved in all this, and said the film looked terrible and things like that.
Katzenberg said it did?
I believe. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, it was one of those big wigs at Disney at the time.
Was this like an early rendering where the water graphics and all that weren't strong, or was he saying like the finished product was not up to?
I think it was the finished product.
Wow.
There's just a lot of headbutting going on with Jobs and I think Lasseter. And if Phil was here, he'd be able to correct us on all this stuff, or if I had done my research. But anyway, big surprise is the point, is how popular the film was.
Okay.
For me, it is one of the funniest of Pixar's.
Yes.
But it delivers in a big way. My favorite part, not just in this film, but probably of all Pixar films, is the moment where when the pelican, Nigel, gets to the fish tank, where Nemo's trapped with the other fish. He's trying to get out, thinks his dad is long gone, not come after him. And Nigel shows up and informs him of his father, Merlin, in the ocean coming to get his son, and Nemo doesn't believe him. But he's telling the story of how he's faced off with sharks and sea turtles, and the music kicks in, and it's slow close-up on Nemo. And I mean, it's the biggest payoff of the film because the son is realizing how much the father loves him, and it's that moment that's when he gets the courage to go do what he needs to do to escape. And the payoff was so big, it delivered in such a big way that I couldn't wait for them to make a sequel, and which I've heard Finding Dory, it's getting positive reviews. I don't think it can live up to the first one, but it's getting overall.
Yeah, it's a pretty hard act to follow, for sure. That's a great movie. I still, when my kids are like, oh, we want to watch a movie, I always recommend Finding Nemo. I think partly because as a dad, it does pull on your heartstrings.
Oh, yeah, big time.
But it's so brilliantly made, and it's charming, and it's funny. And, well, the immediate biblical theme comes to my mind, too, of just the prodigal son, the father racing out trying to get him. There's just so many beautiful themes in that movie worth encouraging people to talk about. So, Finding Nemo, great pick. Okay, so I'm taking my something old, slightly different direction. This past week, I watched Gladiator.
Oh, okay.
Again, which I think came out in 1999.
Jason, can you confirm that?
I think so.
All right.
So, Ridley Scott film.
Yep.
Russell Moore.
Crowe.
Russell Crowe. Sorry, Russell Moore. Oh my gosh. See, I'm getting my podcast confused. Someone's got to create a Photoshop of Russell Moore as Gladiator, as Maximus. So the film, it's obviously fairly violent for obvious reasons. Ridley Scott since then has gone on to make other period pieces. He tried to make that Exodus movie with Christian Bale about Moses and Pharaoh and all that, and I really hated that movie. Maybe we could talk about that sometime. But this movie, Gladiator, I think holds up really well, even 17 years later. The CG is a little weak when you go back and watch it now, like all the scenes of Rome and things which are in the Colosseum. But the thing I liked about the movie rewatching it was the story is so pure. It's a simple story, but it has some values in it that I just resonate with. For example, the virtue of self-sacrifice, where the old Caesar who's dying wants to return Rome to a republic, and he entrusts it to Maximus, saying you take over basically as the emperor for the sole purpose of returning Rome to a republic because you are a virtuous man who's not self-seeking. And you compare him with Commodus, who's the evil son who ends up becoming Caesar, who's just this paranoid, insecure politician who's completely self-seeking. And it just brought to my mind the turmoil we're in even now as a culture, where are the good, virtuous leaders who are truly not in it for themselves, but for others? And then the other dynamic, which I thought was an interesting commentary on our times, was the movie is really focused on the goal of persuading the mob, right? Rome is a mob. It's all about entertaining people, and if you can entertain them, they'll do whatever you want. And so at first it's the emperor who's entertaining them because he's throwing these games, and then it becomes Maximus, the gladiator, who entertains them because he's such a magnificent fighter, and whoever can persuade people through entertainment really ends up ruling the whole empire. And it's hard to think we're not in that position now, where it's just about entertainment. Like, we have an entertaining candidate in Donald Trump, and so millions of people flock to him regardless if there's any substance there. So anyway, Gladiator is one of those evergreen, enduring stories that I think is a well-made movie. It's well acted, it's well portrayed, it holds up well. Something old, go watch it again. And when you can't take it anymore and you need something uplifting and charming, go watch Finding Nemo. Any thoughts on Gladiator?
Well, just to one, where are those virtuous leaders? Maximus, the virtuous leader, did not want to lead. He wanted to go home.
Right.
Which I think that's, the guy or gal you want, in office, so to speak, is the person who's not typically going to do it.
Yeah, the reluctant leader is the one who can be trusted with power.
Right,
yeah.
right. And the other thing, I love Gladiator, but did you see The Revenant with
No.
Leonardo DiCaprio?
No, I have not.
It's Braveheart, Gladiator, and The Revenant. It's the same movie. They're all great, and they all have a theme of family and love and loss, and then ultimately ending in some kind of paradise.
Yeah.
They all end up in these movies, their version of heaven is being with their spouse or their family.
Right.
And so they all have that basic theme to it, but all of them. Great execution, great actors, very entertaining.
Yeah.
They all have their different bents, whether it's on political leadership or, The Revenant. It was more about revenge, but
yeah, and that's been a powerful theme in a lot of movies, especially Mel Gibson movies seem to always return to the revenge theme.
big time.
Yeah. What I liked about Gladiator is there was the revenge component in there, and he says that as much when he first confronts Commodus. He says, I will have my revenge. But by the end of the film, you realize it's not just about the revenge. It's about the common good. He wants to free Rome from the tyranny of this emperor. And so there is that vengeance thing, but there's something more going on.
Well, he was experiencing it personally, so he wanted to deliver.
Okay, so let's move on to something new. Here we're going to talk about Zootopia. Josh, can you kind of introduce the film for those who haven't seen it or are aware of what it is? Give us the basic 411 on Zootopia.
All right, Zootopia, Disney movie in theaters a few months ago, just released on DVD and Blu-ray. It's the modern mammal metropolis of Zootopia. Is a city like no other. It is a melting pot where animals from every environment live together, a place where no matter where you are or what you are, from the biggest elephant to the smallest shrew, you can be anything. But when rookie officer Judy Hopps arrives, she discovers that being the first bunny on a police force of big, tough animals isn't so easy. Determined to prove herself, she jumps at the opportunity to crack a case, even if it means partnering with a fast-talking scam artist fox, Nick Wilde, to solve the mystery. So that kind of gives you an intro to the film.
Okay, so now the reason why we call this the movie proposal is when we review a movie, what I'm trying to frame it as is I want each of us to give a proposal about a simple encapsulation of your proposal about this movie, and then we will talk about it to determine whether or not we agree to the proposal. So, Josh, what is your proposal about Zootopia?
Skye, I propose that Zootopia is a social commentary depicting people's fears of one another, disguised as a modern-day Rudy. Also, Silver Lining Playbook in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and delivers in a big way for the whole family.
Okay, so wait a minute. Slow down. Let's take this piece by piece. It's a social commentary.
Yes.
But you're comparing it to Rudy. Which other ones?
Silver Lining Playbook.
I saw that. Silver Lining Playbook.
And Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Okay. Why those three films?
Well, Rudy, because it's the story, the protagonist, Judy Hopps.
Yeah.
She's an idealistic, hopeful character who says anyone can be anything. But everyone around her tells her that's not true. You need to settle in. You're limited. There's only so much you can do. But she goes on to disprove them. So there's never been a bunny cop. So she becomes the first bunny cop, much to everyone's surprise, right? So that's the Rudy part.
Yeah.
The Silver Lining Playbook, it's the relationship. The heart of this story is the relationship between Judy and Nick, the fox. Two unlikely characters who meet, don't like each other, but become friends, and then apparently fall in love, which is the story of Silver Lining Playbook, where you've got Jennifer Lawrence and Bradley Cooper, two unlikely characters who don't like each other, eventually become friends. But they also they have a mission. They have something that they're going for together. In Zootopia, they're going They're working together to solve a crime.
Right.
And begrudgingly so. They don't want to work together to do this,
But they need each other.
Same thing in Silver Lining Playbook. They don't really necessarily want to work together, but they kind of need each other.
Okay.
And then in doing that, they spend time together, which is a key to this discussion in Zootopia, is that this whole theme of the social commentary is that Judy and Nick spend time together. And
overcome their differences.
Right, and so we can talk about that. But in doing so, they, as far as their relationship is concerned, they not only become friends. In Silver Lining Playbook, they fall in love. In Zootopia, they seem to love each other. They mention the word love.
Yeah.
Not really sure where that's
Spoiler
going.
alert, by the end of the movie, they become partners in the police force.
Yes.
So,
yes.
and I thought that was an interesting... I don't know, just the word partners is so charged in our culture right now. I thought there was more going on there.
Sure.
And then Roger Rabbit, just because this is an animated rabbit, or what?
Well, it's a couple things. It's Zootopia has a lot of film noir, detective, dark mystery.
Right.
Same thing with Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Someone died, and what happened, who did it, and on top of that, it's a bunch of cartoon animals. And there's discrimination even in that world of Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
Because they're cartoon creatures, or
right. The cartoon creatures versus the human creatures are kind of the tension. Whereas in Zootopia, it's carnivores and herbivores.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. We will get into that more. Here's my proposal.
All right.
It's a little bit shorter than yours. I propose that Zootopia is the ultimate millennial movie.
Oh, wow.
And here's my reasons. It has all of the characteristics, all the stereotypes, good and bad, that have come to mark a millennial generation. For example, helicopter parents, right? Okay. Judy Hopps' parents are constantly worried about her safety, constantly calling her, checking in on her. It's almost annoying how overprotective they are. Secondly, from the very opening scene of the movie, the message that Judy that animates her life is that she wants to change the world, right? And which again is a major theme, the activist theme of millennials. They all think they want to change the world. They're all going to make the world a better place. Third, the movie is hyper sensitive on political correctness. Yeah. In fact, there are times where it pokes fun at political correctness, but more often than not, it really re-emphasizes it. But it's rooted in hypocrisy, which I really want to talk about in a second. That despite being totally pro-PC, the movie relies heavily on stereotypes, which, again, we can dig into in a second. Something you already mentioned, the overwhelming message of Zootopia, both the city in the movie and the movie itself, is that anyone can be anything. So this idea that identity is something which one self-constructs, that you're not defined by where you came from, you're not defined by your biology, you're not defined by your family, you're not defined by your species, you can be anything you want. And that is the ongoing tension throughout the whole film. And then finally, the last kind of millennial theme is there's a very strong message of anti-bullying in the movie. And that, of course, is not a bad thing. But what was interesting is that hardship, pain, and struggle in this film, which I think represents a massive departure from previous animated films for children. Hardship at the hands of bullies in this film is universally depicted as a bad thing. And it's not depicted as something that results in greater grit or perseverance or a challenge to overcome. So there's a flashback scene in which Nick Wilde, who's the fox, is remembering a scene from his childhood when he's going to join like a Boy Scout kind of troop. Mm-hmm. But he's the only carnivore in this group. Everyone else is like sheep and pigs and things like that, and he's a fox. And they end up essentially hazing him and bullying him and humiliating him as a result. They wouldn't let him into their club. And he's like carrying around the woundedness from this experience, which is why he has kind of become callous toward the world. But when I was growing up, I remember stories of kids being teased or bullied, but it was usually depicted in a way that ended up resulting in the growth of their character. Like it made them stronger people. It made them more resilient. Are you
referring to real life or another movie?
In both, both. But I mean, I'm not in any way advocating bullying, but there's sort of, when you encounter that kind of hardship as a kid, you can either look at it as just 100% universally bad, that has no redemptive element to it, or you can see it as, yeah, this is bad and wrong, but this has a redemptive role in my life. It can make me a better person. It can make me a more compassionate person. It can make me a stronger person. And in this movie, it seemed like bullying is just always bad.
Well, I'll counter that.
Okay.
Because I think there's two responses to bullying. There's Nick's response where he gets bullied, so he gives into it. They see me as a sly fox, so I will be a sly fox. And then Judy gets bullied, and she responds that I'm going to prove everyone wrong.
Right.
And so I think she does take on that role that you're describing, that she does say, I want to be I'm going to be stronger for this.
Yeah, but I agree with you, but there's two things that I would throw back and counter to that. One is, first of all, she had the goal of being a police officer and changing the world before she's bullied. Like, it's just, it isn't the bullying that, it's not like Spider-Man, right? Where he sees Uncle Ben being killed, and it's, with great power comes great responsibility. And that pain and struggle is what sort of crystallizes for him his decision to, I'm going to do something about what's wrong in the world. Yeah. She's just this happy-go-lucky kid who wants to change the world, and there's this bully in my way. Well, he's not going to get in the way of my dreams. It isn't like the bullying or the injustice is actually what propelled that dream for her.
You're right. We don't see that action happen.
Number two, when she grows up, she bumps into this bully again, who's now grown up. But now he's a baker. Right. And he makes pies and he works with rabbits, and he repents and basically says, I was very insecure as a kid and I'm sorry for bullying you.
He dealt with self-doubt.
I was riddled with self-doubt, and that's why I bullied you. But there was no, there wasn't any overcoming of the bully. It was the bully realized he's a bully and repented. And it was kind of like, well, that doesn't really help kids understand, what am I supposed to do with this? It was a little Pollyanna-ish in that regard. So that's why, I mean, like when I was a kid, and I can't name specifics, I didn't take time to think about it, but I remember stories, whether they're after-school specials or whatever, about bullies, and it was, I mean, goodness, even the Christmas Story, right? What was that with, what was that bully's name? Farkas. Yes. Right, he had yellow eyes. Yellow eyes, and and finally, Ralphie just breaks and beats the snot out of the kid. Right. I mean, and there you can see, like, this bully gets what's coming to him. There's kind of a justice streak in the whole thing. And in this film, it was just like, bullies are just bad, and if you're a bully, it's because you're insecure, and it just kind of defanged the whole bully idea.
Well, I think that was the point, is to show that, you can be more than who you are, or you can be different. Where Nick believed everyone saw him as a sly fox, so why bother trying to be anything than what people say? So he didn't see a way to overcome. And I don't think it was an accident that the bully that Judy encountered was also a fox.
Well, yeah, but it also go ahead.
And that he changed. That he not only did she see that the bully from her past, a fox, she comes home, he changed, and he said, he's asking for forgiveness and that kind of stuff, and so not only did she realize that a predator can change, but in that same scene, she learns that a prey, a bunny, can also turn savage, which is a phrase they used in there, and so she realized that. It doesn't matter if you're a prey or a predator, that you can be a jerk, no matter who you are, and you can change.
Okay, which brings up another point, and I'm totally kind of Breaking Bad on this movie. And
by the way,
there was a funny Breaking Bad cameo kind of thing in there, which was very funny.
Another reason I love this movie.
On the positive, it's a brilliantly told story. It's well animated. I think all the characters are very compelling. It's a fun movie. It's a really, really fun movie.
Which is key to why this film worked.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
So the other thing that I think just exemplifies millennial values is everyone is a victim in this story. Like the bully, well, I was just insecure as a kid. I'm sorry. Nick Wilde, who's this scoundrel of a fox who cheats, and well, I'm doing it because I was bullied as a kid. So everyone's like a victim all the way through it, and all the predators who go savage are victims, and even the ultimate bad guy in the movie, who's this sheep, who, again, spoilers, you know, her motivation is, well, we've been picked on for too long.
Right.
You know, we prey have been picked on for too long, and we need to, you know, have power again, and we're going to do it by ironically depicting ourselves as even more victimized. So in that regard, it exemplified for me where we are as a culture, which is the way you gain power in our culture today is by claiming victimhood. It's the victims who are given the pedestal to have influence and power. And it seems strange and weird, but Zootopia just perfectly exemplifies that posture. Okay, let me transition though, because there's two other aspects I think we really should talk about.
All right.
One is the kind of political correct thing. There's this scene, it's laced throughout the movie, but there's this scene where
the elephant scene?
No, we'll get there.
Oh, okay.
Where somebody says to Judy Hopps, who's this little bunny rabbit
right,
police officer, comments on how cute she is.
Right.
And she says, I think I have it here.
It's okay if
You probably don't know, she says, but a bunny can call another bunny cute, but when another animal does it, well, it's, and then the guy starts apologizing.
And right. He realizes he's offended her.
Right. And when you see it, you go, okay, that's funny, because it's poking fun at how politically correct our culture's become.
Which my kid went right over my kid's head.
Yeah, there's those adult things that Pixar and Disney tend to do in their humor that's targeting the parents. But it kind of comes up over and over and over again in the story where, well, it's wrong to stereotype predators as violent, and it's wrong to stereotype anybody in any way. In any way whatsoever. So it keeps going. But that's like one of the dominant messages of this movie, right? And yet, the humor throughout the movie is all predicated on stereotypes.
Absolutely.
So you have, at the DMV, all the workers are literal sloths. Right? You have the cop who's at the front desk who's overweight and eats donuts all the time. Right? You have a weasel.
Who's weaselly.
Who's weaselly and a criminal.
Right.
And you have a fox.
Who's sly.
Who's sly and also a criminal. And so it's like, well,
and the bunny is cute.
Yeah. So after a while, you kind of go, wait, which way do you want it? Do you want us all to not have any stereotypes, but then find all these stereotypes really funny at the same time? Which feels a little bit to me like the hypocrisy that, frankly, I encounter with some millennials, where they're hypersensitive, politically correct, and yet that doesn't extend to everybody, because it's okay to make fun of certain groups or individuals because they're not seen as inclusive.
Well, right. And I think part of the humor is the sensitivity to stereotypes.
Yeah.
Judy getting offended when she's called cute, right? And then the humor is in that a lot of the stereotypes were true, which there was people like Judy defending Nick, that go, you know, he's not a sly fox, when actually he was.
Right.
You know, but then there's the other extreme where, you know, the yak saying the elephant never forgets. I mean, that's a stereotype, but then the reality is the elephant didn't remember anything.
Right.
And it was the yak who remembered everything, right?
Right.
You know? So I think what's great is that they meshed it all together, which created a lot of humor. I think it's making fun of our culture and all the PC that we have. What really, with this theme of PC and how they address it and lessons we're supposed to learn from it and how we walk away from it, I just loved that they made a joke at the very end when everything ends happily. It's all coming together, and Nick says to Judy, who's driving a car, "Are all bunnies bad drivers?" Which was great. It was like it was that they could make fun of themselves, they could make fun of society, and realize, because that's one of the lines in the movie is life is messy,
right?
It's complicated.
Yeah,
not a bumper sticker, which I thought was a fantastic way to end it, and that there was no simple solution. And I really think they were just saying, like, I think we've gone overboard. I think we need to be respectful of one another, but realize it is complicated.
Right. And yeah, that is a redemptive message. I agree. Yeah. Okay, last piece on this film, and then we'll agree or disagree on our proposals.
Oh, okay.
This identity thing. The slogan of Zootopia, where anyone can be anything. Right. So here's this little bunny everyone says you can't be a cop because you're a little bunny, and she defies that and she becomes, you know, the savior of the city and the police force. There's a scene the elephant scene we're talking about, where there's an ice cream shop that is run by elephants, and there's a sign on the shop that says, "We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone." Right? Which, I mean, hello, that is bullseye. Ripped from the headlines, right? And Nick Wilde, the fox, comes in with this other character who's a little, I don't know if he's a little fox. What is he?
You know, I never figured out what he was.
Yeah, he was this little tiny character.
He's a fennec fox.
A fennec fox, we're being told.
So a type of fox.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And he's dressed up like Nick's son, but he's dressed as an elephant. He's got an elephant costume on, and he's going into this elephant ice cream shop and wants this giant popsicle.
Elephant popsicle.
Elephant popsicle. And the elephant behind the counter is like, "No way, we don't serve your kind here, basically. You're not gonna." And it turns this whole sob story. And Nick Wilde, I keep saying Fox. Nick Wilde keeps kind of plays on the emotions of the moment by saying that his son wants to grow up to be an elephant.
Right.
Right? And he's got this elephant costume on, and Judy Hopps comes in and totally eats it up and says, "Sure, yeah, you know what? This is Zootopia. If you want to be an elephant when you grow up, you can be an elephant." And again, it feeds into the overall message of the film. Anyone can be anything. Let's not stereotype. Let's not put any limitations on people, which is a massive cultural message right now. Right? You are not defined by anything.
Right.
Even your biology.
Right.
If you were born a certain gender, you're not bound by that.
Right.
You can be whatever, anything you want. And again, on one level, you go, yeah, that's a great message. On another level, has it reached absurdity?
That like a fox could become an elephant.
Right. I mean, even a 5-year-old can go, no. This little fox cannot grow up to be an elephant. That is an impossibility.
Right.
And yet the message of the movie is anyone can be anything. And when you think of other movies like Rudy, you mentioned Rudy.
Right.
Okay. No one thinks he can be on the football team. He makes it to the football team. Judy Hopps, no one thinks she can be a cop, but she can be a cop. But a fox becoming an elephant, like that is just a transformation too far.
Correct.
Right? And so the problem I have with this is it does, on one level, we want to communicate to our children, achieve, right? If you have a calling, if you have a vision, if you have a determination, you want to change something about this world that's broken and needs to be healed, we want you to be empowered to do that. And that's been a long-standing American value. But we've now gotten to the place where we are basically telling our children, you can change your species. Right? There should be no boundaries. And the problem I have with that as a Christian is that in my theology, the most valuable things that God gives us are valuable precisely because they have boundaries. So let me give a couple of examples. Marriage. Marriage is valuable, at least from a Christian point of view, because there are boundaries, right? To have and to hold from this day forward, no other, till death do us part. We put boundaries on that relationship, which gives it definition and value. Work is supposed to be a good, valuable thing we do, which then God says, here are the boundaries on it. You are to work 6 days and rest 1. And by putting boundaries on it, you actually make it more valuable rather than less because it doesn't take over your life. Money, you go on down the list of good things we've been given, sexuality, whatever, and they all have boundaries on them. And we've now gotten to a place as a society that says the only good value is to have no boundaries at all. And I felt like this movie, rather than saying a more honest message of, hey, kid, it's fun to play elephant, and that's great, you can do that. You're not going to be an elephant, and let's figure out what's good about who you are. It became, yeah, be an elephant. And it's like, oh my gosh. And it came out in various places throughout the film. I would have hated a film that said to Judy, don't be a cop. You can't be a cop, right? But no, I'm glad that the movie depicted her becoming a cop. But it reached kind of the level of absurdity. And then the whole metaphor of the film is predators and prey live together in harmony, and predators don't have to be predators anymore. And I understand they were using this as a metaphor, but at some level it gets kind of absurd.
Well, yeah, if you take the analogy too far, it breaks down. And it is a kid's film, so it's...
I know it's a kid's film and I'm taking it too far, but...
Well, but I'd like to comment on what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because a couple things is, it opens with anyone can be anything. But and that's Judy's message.
Right.
But it's at the end... Or let me back up. So it opens with that message, anyone can be anything. We get to that elephant scene, and everyone's embarrassed. in that scene. The elephants get embarrassed because not only is their thinking backwards, but the way they run a business is backwards. You know, they don't use gloves when they scoop ice cream and that kind of stuff. And Judy's backwards because she's patronizing to the fox, right? She thinks she's being kind and she's actually kind of being insulting to him, right? And then the fox is actually being sly and he gets caught in all that. And so it's a funny scene because of that. But at the end, the message that Judy gives is that we all have limitations, and the message of any, life isn't, what's that, something about a bumper sticker?
Yeah, here's the quote. She says, "When I was a kid, I thought Zootopia was a perfect place where everyone got along and anyone could be anything. It turns out real life is a little bit more complicated than a slogan on a bumper sticker. Real life is messy. We all have limitations. We all make mistakes. Which means, hey, we all have a lot in common. The more we try to understand one another, the more exceptional each of us will be. But we have to try. So no matter what type of animal you are, I implore you, try. Try to make the world a better place. Look inside yourself and recognize that change starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with all of us."
So I felt that was the message. So I would disagree with a little bit with what you're saying in that I didn't walk away, and I don't even think my kids walked away because I asked them like, what'd you get out of the film? And the big message was try everything,
Which is the song, the
Right.
Shakira song.
right? Which was great. I thought we listened to it over and over again.
Yeah.
But so it went from a you can be anything to we have limitations. Life isn't simple. You can't just be anything you want to be. But you should be willing to try, which I felt like that was the message. Don't try to be an elephant if you're a fox, but try and be a cop, even though no one's been a cop in your family before, or whatever it might be, right? So I took it a little bit differently. My kids, just my discussion with them, so much of the film went over their heads, just in terms of like the PC and the relationships and the bullying even. But it was more of like, hey, there was a bunny who was told she couldn't be a cop, but she did it.
Right.
And then she became friends with the fox. And that's the movie.
Right. And then
my kids.
Exactly. If you're going to watch this from an 8-year-old's point of view,
Right.
that's what you're going to get,
Right.
which is wonderful.
Right.
And that's where Pixar and Disney do this so well. They're able to tell stories on multiple levels, which is why the parents find the movies entertaining. It's why the kids find it entertaining. Right. So it is a really well-made movie. For me, I found so not bad. I thought it was probably the best movie of the year in encapsulating the values of our culture. Like for me,
Sure.
it showed where our culture is on these issues. And if I were sitting down with a group of people and they asked me what's the one movie we should watch this year to help us understand our culture, I would probably say this is the one.
Right. But I don't know if we're agreeing or disagreeing, but the whole thing on the limitations, when she says we all have limitations, which is what we have in common, to me that is a different message than you can be whatever you want, no matter what your species is.
Yeah, but see, where I disagree with you is I love that statement at the end, we all have limitations. I didn't pick that up anywhere in the movie. She says it at the end, but the overwhelming message of the movie is you don't have limitations. You can be whatever you want to be, and anybody who tries to stereotype you is wrong.
Yeah, the scene with the fox where the little kid, well, he's not a kid, the guy pretending to be a kid dressed up as the elephant. The reason to me it was funny is that, first of all, he's this little
it's
animal,
hysterical.
but he's got this deep, gruff voice,
Right.
and so and it's so cute that he's portraying that he wants to grow to be an elephant. When he's walking away from her, like they didn't say it in the movie, but it's almost like that's so ridiculous that they
Right.
thought I wanted to be an elephant. How ridiculous is that? And they thought I was a kid.
Yeah.
How ridiculous is that? And so I thought that the message of that you can be anything was almost made fun of in that scene.
I agree, it was, but when you put it together as a whole, I mean, the movie basically saying, here's the ongoing question I still have about this movie. What do the predators eat in Zootopia?
There's a lot of holes. Where are the birds?
Yeah.
Was there a monkey in this film?
No, but I think it could be monkeyist. Maybe it's a monkeyist movie.
There were no fish. There were no birds.
So basically, if you're a predator and you are engineered, whether by God or by
Right,
evolution,
right.
to kill other animals and eat them. You don't have to anymore.
Right.
You can, and again, the metaphors break down when
It's
you
an
push them too
analogy,
far. I
right,
know
right,
it breaks
right.
down, but the overwhelming message is, hey, just because your ancestors were meat eaters doesn't mean you have to be.
Right.
Just because your family historically grew carrots on a hodunk farm out in the country doesn't mean you can't be a city cop.
And just because your grandparents are racist doesn't mean you have to be.
Yeah, or just because you were a bully as a kid doesn't mean you have to stay a bully as a
Right.
And on some level, all those messages, you go, okay, that's great. But on when you take it to the extreme that our culture has, you go, wait a minute. At some point, this breaks down.
Which I thought they were making fun of.
But it only came through subtly. And I
Sure.
think the hammer message was, you can be anything. Like, does that make sense?
It does,
Like,
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
there. I mean, there's plausible deniability.
Well, he
on the
does.
message.
I mean, at the end, Nick becomes what he wants to be. Judy becomes what she wants to be.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
But there was enough in there for me to walk away saying, like, well, yeah, but to take it to the extreme is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because I felt they made fun of the ridiculousness.
Well, and I feel like our culture is getting ridiculous.
Agreed.
And may not see this film as ridiculous as you or I may have, and entertaining. Okay, so here's the question at the end of the day. Your proposal, once again.
My proposal was that, sorry, Zootopia is a social commentary depicting people's fears of one another, disguised as a modern-day Rudy / Silverline Playbook / Roger Rabbit, and delivers in a big way for the
Okay,
family.
so Josh,
Yes.
do you take this movie to be faithfully watched again?
Oh, absolutely.
I do.
I do.
You do.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
All right. And my proposal was that Zootopia is the ultimate millennial movie. And I will take this movie to be watched again. I do also. So we have two I do's with this movie. It's a good movie.
Yes.
It needs to be watched thoughtfully and carefully. Okay. Quickly, our next segment, Something Borrowed. There is a fascinating article that I read this week from The Atlantic. I'm pulling it up right now. We're not going to take a ton of time on this because you guys should go read it yourself, by Derek Thompson, called Hollywood Has a Huge Millennial Problem. Okay, so real quickly, let me read a bit from his article. He says, sequels have been the lifeblood of the movie business for the last decade. But in the last 6 months, the sequel strategy seems to be deflating. Several follow-up movies, and he lists a bunch of them that have come out this year, have been disappointing or flopped outright. But he goes on to say, perhaps Hollywood's funk is even worse than a sequel slump. In 2016, the film industry is on pace to sell the fewest U.S. tickets per person of any year since perhaps before the 1920s. So people just aren't going to movies anymore.
Right.
He says the short answer to all this is that the movie industry has overlearned the lesson that sequels perform well at the box office and has tried to sequelize every marginally successful movie. The deeper answer, however, is that on top of long-term structural declines in movie attendance, Hollywood is losing its grip on young people. He goes on to talk about the sequel machine isn't quite working the way it used to. It gets into a lot of detail about why sequels are the kind of business model of Hollywood. But ultimately, he lands at this idea that millennials, again, young adults, just don't watch as many movies. They don't buy as many tickets to the movies as prior generations did. And instead, what they're doing is engaging far more in online media.
Right. So they don't see movies in theaters as much.
Right.
But certainly a lot on mobile devices.
Right. Netflix,
Hulu.
but they're
Amazon.
also getting into subscribed television, watching like HBO Go and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. But it's significantly declining actual movie business, which then causes these studios to go after pre-established audiences, particularly in Asia, and they don't want to gamble on new movie ideas, so they keep making more and more sequels because they have a greater likelihood of a return on their investment.
Right.
So we're stuck in this kind of tailspin of declining ticket sales, so they keep making more and more sequels, which are doing less and less well. Where does all this end up?
Well, I thought 6 months was kind of a short time frame to make a huge judgment call.
Yeah,
I mean,
but the fact that there's fewer movie tickets being sold now than
Well, that's true.
since the 1920s.
See, I thought that was because I have kids and I go to the movie theaters less because I have children.
Yes.
But apparently the whole world is going to fewer and fewer screenings. I do think, I mean, at the end, he did say that even though ticket sales are down ticket sales for movies still dominate compared to other things. Like if you look at ticket sales for the 4 major, NFL, NHL.
Yeah, but look at
combined,
there's one NFL team in Chicago
True,
here that
true.
only can hold so many thousands of people, where there's a bazillion movie theaters.
But that's the point, is you can have a bazillion movie theaters, and so they're not. It's not the industry is not dead. It's just changing, because a lot of what the type of originality that you might want to see, it's cheaper to make those things for television,
Right.
and Netflix kind of thing, than it is in the theaters, because in terms of the money, I'm not sure how the business model works. It's just cheaper and more cost effective to do it that way, right? The other thing you talked about in the article is they've overlearned their lesson in sequels. That
Right.
if it had any kind of marginal success, we're making a part 2 and 3 of this thing,
Right.
which gets tiresome after a while, of course. But I'm that guy, I'm that kid that when I saw Return of the Jedi in theaters, I could not shut up. I mean, I could not stop talking about that movie, and so every time I see a good movie and I hear a sequel's coming out,
Yeah.
I get excited. Now, the adult side of me has learned lessons.
Right.
When I heard they were making the prequels to Star Wars, I was giddy as a kid, and then I was still in shock. Like, was that really bad? That wasn't bad. Was it bad?
It was horrible.
It was horrible,
Yeah.
right?
I won't even let my children watch the
Right.
prequels.
And so then they announced later they're making more Star Wars, and of course, the lessons I learned from the prequels, I'm like, oh, they got to be good, right? They can't
Right.
screw
Well,
it up
as
again.
A dog returns to its vomit, so a
Right.
fool returns to his vomit. Right?
So this fool got excited,
Yeah.
right? And thankfully it paid off, right? And so now you're back on that bandwagon. Cannot wait for Rogue One.
Okay.
Cannot wait for episode.
I agree.
Right?
It's one thing when you're talking about Star Wars. I mean, it's a unique property.
Right.
Please, Lord, I don't want any more Indiana Jones sequels.
And
They're planning to do another
they
one.
are number 5.
I mean, some things just need to end. So in the article, you mentioned that 20 years ago, in 1996, none of the top 10 grossing films were sequels or superhero movies.
Right.
None.
Right.
And now they all are. So, and the other thing which I found fascinating, he said in the first half of the 20th century, going to the movies was like going to church. Americans did it almost every week.
Right.
Today, buying a movie ticket is more like going to the doctor, something many Americans never do, and most Americans do 4 or 5 times a year for routine cultural checkups. So just the whole culture around movies has changed. The business around it has changed. And we're kind of in this, like I said, a tailspin. And maybe what's going to end up saving the industry is the overseas market.
Well, so my wife was out of town this weekend, and so what did my kids and I do all weekend? We watched movies, right?
Yeah.
We were catching on films, and we had a movie binge, and we could stream new films like Zootopia for $1, and
Wait a minute, where'd you stream it for $1?
Vid Angel.
Oh yeah, you told me about this. Okay.
Yeah,
See, I got it on iTunes. I paid like $6.
See, yeah. But I mean, even though $6 is cheaper than you spending 5 tickets for the
Right.
whole family and that kind of thing. So number one, it was cheaper. So I think we watched 4 or 5 films for a total of $4 or $5 versus going to the theater and having to tell my kids, no, you can't have any popcorn. No, you can't buy a meal. That kind of stuff. So like just the convenience and the cost plays a major factor. However, when Captain America Civil War came out, my son was begging, can we go see it on opening night? And of
Right.
course we did. I wanted to see it.
It was an event.
It was an event.
Right.
Right. And we went and we were excited because it has a good track record.
Right.
We're excited to see that. So like Indiana Jones, I'm the same way. Die Hard, my number one favorite film all times, Josh's top 100 list, number one is Raiders of the Lost Ark. And so when they came out with Crystal Skull, I walked out of there confused. I'm like, how could they make Indiana Jones can't be a bad film. It took me a
Right.
while to realize it was a bad film.
Right.
And then when they announced they're making a 5, that little kid in me is jumping up and down, but the dad in me, the 40-year-old Josh is like, oh, they're going to screw it up again.
Yeah, yeah. See, but there is something to be said when taking a family to the movies is so expensive. You want to have some assurance that what you're going to see is worth
Right.
the money. And
Right.
there's Rotten Tomatoes and other things you can check.
Right.
But
Which we go to.
But there is some assurance going, okay, Marvel has had an amazing track record.
Right.
It's probably going to be a good movie. I'll do it. And the studios are banking on that because it's really hard to get an audience to come out and spend a lot of money for an unknown property
Right.
and an unproven product. And so we're caught in the sequel thing. Anyway, guys, I encourage you to read this article, how Hollywood has a huge millennial problem from The Atlantic. You can comment on Patreon with us about what you think of the article. Is it right? Is it wrong? Are you in love with all the sequels? You think you're getting fatigued? Give us your thoughts also on Zootopia. We'd love to hear your input. Do you think this was a clear cultural moment kind of movie that encapsulates everything that is good and bad about our culture right now? Would you encourage your kids to see it? What are your problems? What do you love about it? As we wrap up, we have our final segment. Josh, we did something old, something new, something borrowed, and now something blue. And in this segment, we briefly share either something that blew our minds this past week or something that made us blow chunks this week, right? Blue chunks this week. So what have you got, Josh?
Well, I went with the blue chunks side of things, and I thought, what was terrible that I saw fairly recently? We're a subscriber to Netflix. Adam Sandler has made a 6-picture deal with Netflix, and his first one was The Ridiculous Six. And I think I can name 2 or 3 movies in my entire life that I stopped watching.
Wow.
One of them was Lion King Part 2. I can't remember what the second one was, but the third one was The Ridiculous Six. It was horrible. And it had great, like a lot of fun, good, funny actors in it, and which really surprised me how many familiar actors were in there. But it was, I knew Adam Sandler had a string of bad movies, but they made this new deal with Netflix. I thought, somehow I got tricked into thinking it would be a better film. It was awful. It blew chunks, not funny. I don't mind films, this is comedies when they're offensive necessarily, but this was offensive and not funny, which just made it worse.
Okay. I also have a blue chunks for my thing, and it's not nearly as big a deal as maybe an Adam Sandler film on Netflix. It's a stupid Old Spice commercial I found on YouTube. They've had a string of really hysterical ad campaigns on YouTube, but their newest one is titled Horrifying Mutant Nightmare Abomination Remix, where they've taken a bunch of characters and themes and weirdness from their prior commercials and mushed it all together.
So that's Old Spice who made this remix?
Old Spice, the deodorant.
But they made the remix.
They made the remix.
Wow.
Yeah, this is not like some...
Yeah, I saw it.
You saw it.
It was bad.
Yeah, well, I mean, it literally had bears vomiting things, right? So if you want to see horrible but strangely entertaining commercial advertisements on YouTube, check that out from Old Spice.
Can I comment on that real quick?
Yeah.
I was with a group of kids, junior high and high school, and we were talking about advertising, and we asked, what's your favorite commercial? And a big one that came out was that Doritos commercial with from the Super Bowl with the monkey hybrid.
Oh, the monkey puppy monkey baby
Something like
thing?
that, yeah, for Mountain Dew.
Right.
And which I thought was a horrible commercial, but I'm 40, right? 41. And these kids loved it. And I bet Old Spice picked up on that because that's what it reminded me of immediately.
Yeah.
It was like, this is so stupid, but...
Well, here I am talking about it.
There you are.
So clearly, no such thing as bad publicity. They got it. All right, guys. So tell us if there's something that blew your mind this week or that blew chunks. And give us your feedback on this podcast. We'd love to hear your ideas of how to make it better, what worked for you, what didn't, as we refine the idea. Continue to support us on Patreon. We'll continue to make new stuff. We're going to put out extra footage, behind the scenes stuff and other things for those of you who are subscribing. Tell your friends about it. Be sure to tune in for the Phil Vischer podcast this week. And I have one last plug. Josh, you have any plugs?
Oh, no.
Nothing to plug.
I'll do that in the next podcast.
All right, yeah, I didn't give you any fair warning. My final plug is my new ebook, The Voting Booth, is finally out. So you can pick that up on Amazon or go to my website, skyjethani.com. It's not a long read. It's kind of a dialogue and give you some insights about how to think about cultural engagement, particularly in this election season. Thank you guys for listening. Again, give us your feedback. And I promise from this day forward that this podcast will be 100% ukulele free. So if you need to get some space between you and a ukulele, this is the place to be. Thanks for hanging out with us. Don't you dare. He's about to strum it. Don't touch that ukulele. All right. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.